Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Knowing Herstories, Rooting Ourselves in Latinx Feminisms. My name is Simone Viget, and I'm a programs coordinator here at Girls Action Foundation. In a couple of minutes, I'll be passing the mic to Carolina Rios from the organization MUJER. We are very fortunate to have her with us today, and I am happy to see some familiar names joining us for today's webinar. For those returning, welcome back, and for those who are new to our webinar series, I wanted to briefly introduce you to the Girls Action Foundation before passing things along to Carolina. Very quickly, Girls Action Foundation is a national nonprofit that believes in the power of girls as agents of social change. Through our network of organizations across Canada, we lead, develop, and implement transformative programs that are adapted and relevant to the changing realities of girls and young women's lives. We also provide leadership trainings on a national scale, organize networking events, and do other activities that connect girls and young women. Girls Action has 4 national working groups to engage those with similar realities in their programs for girls or young women. Working group participants have the opportunity to exchange ideas on specific issues, share resources and tools, and discuss promising practices. Today's webinar was initiated by the Working Group for Programmers working with newcomer girls and young women. This project is funded by Canadian Women's Foundation. Today's webinar will last approximately an hour, and after introducing Carolina, she'll make her presentation for approximately 30 minutes. We'll then proceed with the Q&A period at the end. Throughout the presentation, you'll be invited to answer poll questions. These won't last more than a couple of minutes. Now I will introduce today's webinar presenter, Carolina Rios. Carolina Rios was born in Peru, and she grew up in Toronto, Ontario. She self-identifies as Latina with Indigenous Quechua roots. She is a passionate activist committed to anti-racism work, Indigenous knowledge, and women's rights. Her passion for social activism stems from her experiences of discrimination and the socioeconomic challenges that her and her parents experienced in Canada. She has been involved in MUJER for many years as a volunteer coordinator, and she now serves on the board of directors. Her community work has been focused on violence prevention, anti-racism, and Latinx Feminisms. She has an Honours B.A. in International Development and Latin American and the Caribbean Studies from York University. Currently, she's a graduate student at OISE in the Department of Social Justice Education. Her research interests are Latinx feminism, anti-racism, anti-oppression, Indigenous methodologies, and critical pedagogy. On her spare time, she enjoys exercising. She has competed in muay thai kickboxing nationally and internationally, participated in a half marathon, and enjoys spinning and CrossFit. So without further ado, I will pass the ball to Carolina, and she will begin her wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to say thank you to Simone and the Girls Action Network for providing this, for organizing this webinar for us, for MUJER. So this is great. We're very excited about doing this webinar on knowing our Herstories, rooting ourselves in Latinx feminism. It's a program that's been running for a few years, and we're very excited to be doing this webinar. Okay, so I will start. Before going into the agenda, I'm going to start with a little bit of background in terms of the organization, a little bit of the history of the organization. So there's a Herstory of Latin American women living in Canada who have organized to build and strengthen the capacity of women in their community to pursue and demand opportunities, rights, and equality. Latinx feminism, or Latinx feminist writers like Lorena Gajardo, Magali San Martin have done quite a bit of work documenting a lot of these Latinx feminist traditions in Toronto. And two significant events that have been documented as part of the history of Latin American women's activism has been these encuentros, which is encounters in English. And it happened in the late 1990s, and it brought together about 650 women and 150 children to participate in group discussions, workshops, roundtables, and cultural events. The encuentros were organized by the Latin American Coalition to End Violence Against Women and Children, LACEF, which emerged in the early 1990s with a mandate of education and violence prevention. Among some of the topics discussed in the encuentros were issues of identity, gender equality, feminism, and anti-racism. One important outcome that came out of the encuentros, and the picture on the slide to the right, that's the poster that was used for the encuentros. And so what came out, one of the recommendations that came out of these two encuentros that happened in the 90s was the creation of an organization that was representative of Latin American women. And so this is how MUJER comes to be. And so MUJER becomes incorporated in 2003, so it's been around for over 10 years. It's again, the continuation of the Latinx feminist traditions here in Toronto, with a commitment to, again, anti-oppressive frameworks and work. So a lot of our programs promote the well-being of Latin American women and youth. We have provided leadership trainings, engaged in community-based research, created numerous educational tools, such as manuals and public service announcements. We are based in Toronto with a partnership network that extends across the province. So we've worked with grassroots groups and organizations in London, Ottawa, Thunder Bay, and other cities. We're deeply committed to building equity using an anti-oppressive, anti-racist feminist framework. So that's just a little bit of the background in terms of the organization, as well as also the connections in terms of how the organization itself is part of these feminist traditions and practices here in Toronto. And also, I guess it is that of this organization or the women that have come across the organization that then the course also continues some of that work. So I just wanted to start with that. And so that was a little bit of the introduction. And now I want to discuss the rooting ourselves in Latinx feminism, the importance of that, and what Latinx feminism means. And then I'll go into the explain a little bit about the Latin American Latinx Feminisms course in terms of sort of the curriculum and our approach. And then we'll end with the Latinx feminist training beyond anti-oppressive workshops, so how we use the course to sort of train people who then become involved in the organization as volunteers. Some have been staff and also board members. Okay. So rooting ourselves in Latinx feminism. So before, I actually wanted to go over the term Latinx before we go into sort of the importance of this and what this means. So Latinx, which actually we're using quite a bit throughout the presentation, is a gender-neutral term, and it moves away from the feminine identifier Latina or the masculine identifier Latino. We used to use the Latin with an at the end, which is the third point here. Which has been used to be more inclusive of the feminine and masculine identities. However, these still are very exclusive, as they do not include people who may be gender nonconforming, gender queer, and so to be inclusive of all of these gender identities, we now use Latinx, so that's Latin with an X at the end. And this is sort of the term that we will be using as well throughout the presentation. So to start with what is Latinx feminism, I thought I would start with a quote that I took from one of their articles that we actually included in the last course. It is by Inés Talamantes, It's called A Mindful Invitation, or Una Invitación Consciente. So I'll read the poem, actually. The ancestors knew we were coming. They left work for us. Now we carry their wisdom forward. Know who you are. Sabe quién eres. Know your land. Conoce tu tierra. Learn your language. Aprende tu idioma. Follow the beliefs of your people, your spiritual culture. Do not let stealth affect you. Seeking and testing, we take time to measure our generations and know that through working together, we continue to build decent conditions for our people. This is our obligation. Never give up. Now, so this poem really sort of sums up the importance of learning about her stories, working together for social change. It's about acknowledging and recognizing that Latinx communities have a history of feminist activism, feminist traditions, and that we need to learn, reclaim, and reconnect with these herstories in order to continue to do the work that our ancestors have already began and had done so much work. And then in order for us to continue to do that, we also need to connect with that and reclaim some of that past. So part of the course, what it does and what Latinx feminism using this framework or approach, participants can see their realities represented in the curriculum. So again, with reconnecting and reclaiming a lot of the curriculum that is developed, it's about being inclusive of diverse voices. And so through the actual curriculum, through the speakers, so participants can see themselves represented through the speakers and also relate with other participants in the course. It also challenges fragmented representations of Latinx women, which you can find in the media and schools, where usually you have Latinx women represent either hypersexualized, and Latino like males are usually portrayed as criminals. So using a Latinx feminist lens allows us to actually have a more complex representation of Latinx people. And it also helps build a sense of community. As we will see when I go into sort of the course, we see how people, through sharing of the stories, through reclaiming of her stories, and reconnecting with these stories and relating to each other, it allows for people to develop a stronger sense of community. So I wanted to actually ask a question here. So what does the Latinx feminisms mean to you? So you'll have about, I believe it's 2 minutes for this question. So if you could, even if it is just one word in terms of what it means to you, that would be great. So I'm gonna open up the poll right now. Okay, so I'll continue with the presentation. I wanted to share a couple of more quotes on what Latinx feminism means. So the first quote I wanted to share is from a book called A Bridge Called My Back. So I'll read the quote. A theory in the flesh means one where the physical realities of our lives, our skin color, the land or concrete we grew up on, our sexual belongings, all fuse to create a politic born out of necessity. Here we attempt to bridge the contradictions in our experiences. We are the color in a white feminist movement. We're the feminists among the people of our culture. We're often the lesbians among the straight. We do this bridging by naming ourselves and by telling our stories in our own words. This is, again, as I mentioned from the book, The Bridge Called My Back, writings by radical women of color, which was published in 1981. It was one of the first books to be published by women of color on feminism. So really what the quote speaks to is the centralizing of these experiences and grounding this theory on these experiences. So from a Latinx feminist perspective, these theorizing, it's not abstract or happening somewhere else, but it's born out of necessity and is experienced in the flesh. So marginalization and discrimination have real consequences that impact the body. The other thing that I think is important about this quote is also the intersectional, interlocking approaches to how we examine race, gender, class, and sexual orientation. Because as you can see in the quote, how we are the color, we're the feminist, we're often the lesbian. So it's like a number of different of these identities playing all at once. So they are simultaneously happening. It cannot be separated. Yes. And so one more quote. This one is by Gloria Anzaldúa. So if some of you may have heard of Gloria Anzaldúa. So why am I compelled to write? Because the world I create in the writing compensates for what the real world does not give me. By writing, I put order in the world, give it a handle so I can grasp it. I write because life does not appease my appetite and hunger, to become more intimate with myself and you, to discover myself, to preserve myself, to make myself, to achieve self-autonomy, to dispel the myths that I am a mad prophet or a poor suffering soul, to convince myself that I am worthy and that what I have to say is not a pile of shit. Finally, I write because I'm scared of writing, but I'm more scared of not writing. So again, through the telling and sharing of our stories, and we begin to also imagine new and different worlds. And I think this is what this quote speaks to. So it's a process of self-preservation and resistance. It's about the power of self-determination and self-autonomy. So it's the power of us being able to label ourselves as opposed to having other people label us, and seeing ourselves as creators of knowledge. She is the writer who's writing and documenting the activism and the Latinx feminisms. And it also involves political and social awareness that involves some form of action. So although she says she's scared to write, she's like, but she's more scared of not writing. So now I want to move on to talking about the course. So the picture that you're seeing on the slide right now is actually the last poster that was used for the course. So the course, it was actually, there are two co-founders of the course. That is Lorena Gajardo and Magali San Martin, who are feminist activists, writers, academics who are actually in a lot of the research. They're reclaiming and documenting a lot of the work of Latinx feminist activism traditions here in Toronto. So the course is a 6-week course that is open to all women identify, people with, to all women identify, including transgender nonconforming, people with Latin American, Afro-Latina, Indigenous Latin American roots. It is also an intergenerational course. Like the first cohort was only open to young women. However, there was a large demand for older women, but also there was the need to also want to hear from the people, having that intergenerational discussions as well. And so the course is also open to women of all ages. And it's open to women who are interested in learning about women's activisms across the Americas. Now, a lot of the women who have taken the course have already been involved in community activism. I remember for the first course, there were women who were part of this group called Mujeres al Frente, which is a queer Latinx group. And even after that, in the other courses, there's been women who have been already actively involved and who were looking for, who were, I guess, almost like hungry to learn about our stories of activism and feminist traditions. Lorena Gajardo, who's one of the co-founders of the course, she refers to this hunger for knowledge and for creating Latinx feminist knowledge as an epistemological activism, which I really like the term. And so the courses run 2009, 2014, and 2015. The reason for the gap between 2009 and 2014 is also because of the lack of resources, and all the people involved in running the course have done, it's been done on under volunteer time, and so it's been difficult because of that. It has been supported by OISE, which has been great because they've been able to provide us with space, no cost, and their space is very accessible. Also, I think an important aspect of also holding it at OISE is it's also the taking up of space in an institution of higher learning where our voices are rarely heard and centered and even recognized as knowledge creators. So the course objectives. So again, in line with what Latinx feminisms has been sort of defining and describing, is to learn about our herstories, our feminist traditions, to understand who we are, so that we can develop a better sense of self and sense of belonging to a long history or a long herstory of activism, resistance, and also resilience. It is to learn from each other and also see each other as knowledge creators. Also to learn from the activism that is happening across the Americas. So our curriculum does include works from Chicana feminist writers from the United States, some of the work that's been done here in Toronto, Latin American women's activism here in Toronto, as well as Latin America in terms of like indigenous movements, Latin American or Afro-Latinx activism. And lastly, it's also to develop a critical consciousness so that we can question knowledges, assumptions that are harmful to ourselves, communities, and other communities or scholars. So this is again so that it leads to some form of action, and that this through like developing this critical consciousness, one that is anti-racist and feminist, that it informs our community organizing. So a little bit about the curriculum. So it does take an intersectional approach that is woven throughout the curriculum. So as opposed to spending just 1 week on Afro-Latinx identity or queer identity, we try to include all those voices throughout the curriculum because we do take an intersectional approach, and also because we understand these, we understand gender, class, race, sexual orientation, and so on to work in interlocking ways. So we cannot separate them, and as we read from all these different Chicana, Afro-Latinx, and Indigenous women, we're not able to separate them, and that they happen simultaneously, so that they may experience racism as well as sexism at the same time. So some of the topics covered are Chicana feminist theory, Indigenous women's activisms, Latinidad, feminist praxis, Afro-Latinidad, queer and Latinidad. I've also listed some of the authors that we used in the curriculum, and I've put up some of the pictures of the books that we've used. The first one is The Bridge Called My Back, which again I mentioned already, and it's one of the first books published by women of color on feminism. So I kind of wanted to mention some of the authors that we used. Carlene Pendleton Jimenez, she actually wrote a very really wonderful piece on a group called Lengua Latina, which explores Latina identity or Latinx identity in Toronto, but at the same time looks at the history of Church Street and some of the connections and contradictions there, which I thought it was a really interesting piece. So some of the other, I just kind of wanted to mention and highlight some of the authors and books that we use. So one of the books that actually everybody connected with, especially in the second course and even in the third course, and people were asked to choose a quote, and a large number of people picked this book, and this the article that was chosen from the book is called Colonizers, and in the book it's actually Colonizers. And so it's written by Cristina Tin Soon. And so she expressed the relationship of her Mexican mother and white father, and she reflects on her mixed blood identity and sort of some of that white privilege, but also herself being being colonized and a colonizer because of this mixed background. So we do also draw on Indigenous women's writers such as Rigoberta Menchú, Hilaria Womyn, who's a Peruvian Indigenous human rights activist. And some of the Afro-Latinx women are Ana María Lara and Carmen Mojica. And again, they explore the Afro-Latin identity. Ana María Lara, she actually discusses terms like blanqueamiento and hispanidad and how these terms seek to erase Afro-Latina and indigenous bodies. She also discusses how she negotiates her blackness and Latinidad, especially living in North America, where sometimes people, Afro-Latinx people, are asked to choose or put in boxes as either black or Latinx. So in terms of the course development, the curriculum development, just wanted to mention a couple of things here. Is that the curriculum has been evolving over the years. Participants have been involved in organizing the course, supported the curriculum development by suggesting readings and helping us identify gaps. I know that, for example, one of the things that we felt was sort of missing in some of the previous courses was to have more voices on queer and trans voices, as well as more Afro-Latinx voices, and so these were included in the last curriculum. Course participants have also been involved in presenting material. At the last course, we had one of the participants actually planned the session and in terms of the materials and the presentations on self-care, which was well received. The participants were well engaged. And so we also combine academic and also non-academic materials, just because, I mean, just to apply to have a variety of different ways in which people can connect with the materials. We also have a private Facebook group, and this allows for participants to share their stories and sort of continue the conversations outside of the classroom and stay connected. And people have actually used it quite a lot, and it's been very good as a tool for participants to stay connected after the course. So another important aspect that I didn't mention here is also language. So because we want everybody to also feel comfortable, and we understand that not everybody may be an English speaker or a fluent English speaker, so some of the, and even in the curriculum we've included some of the materials in Spanish. Some of the discussions are carried in English and Spanish, or a combination of it, of Spanglish, which just helps also, again, making the material in the course more accessible to the diverse Latinx community. So I just wanted to share some testimonials from participants in the course. So first is, I'll read this out as one of the testimonials by a participant. I believe this was the second course. Tonight was such an incredible feeling having so many of you share your stories and feeling like you were pulling the words right out of my mouth. I expected to be in a space with like-minded women. I just never expected to feel so connected and have my own feelings reflected in your experiences. I was a bit shocked. It was a bit shocking, to be honest, but in a really good way. And it's really comforting to know I'm not alone, that I had been viewing all these years is Rios. And that, thank you, this is going to be fun. And so again, it's a sense of feeling connected with other people in terms of what comes out of this sharing of the stories from participants. And the course gave me the opportunity, this is the second testimonial, the course gave me the opportunity to meet other Latin American women and their experiences. The best part was the continuous dialogue between theory and our experiences and immigration stories, especially the group support that allowed us to share very important questions related to our identity, sense of belonging, sense of segregation, discrimination, and in some cases, violence. I'm thankful to MUJER for facilitating a space to strengthen connection between Latin American women and doing it with the support of an academic entity like OISE. And the last testimonial, the Latina Feminisms course provided me with an opportunity to explore the many facets of feminism, providing a more holistic view compared to what has often been misrepresented in the media. As someone who doesn't come from an academic background, I felt feeling empowered with a greater understanding of vocabulary that I had previously found intimidating. The course provided me a safe space and solidarity where I could be open, honest, and share with other women identified Latinas. So these quotes speak to how learning from each other and sharing our stories strengthens this connection and builds deeper connections. It also helps us see that theorizing does not only happen in the academia, as expressed by Fran, but it can happen anywhere. It can happen in a maquiladora factory. It can happen in a classroom with students. What was important too, which I find the last testimony points out to, is also having the language of familiarizing ourselves with our own Herstories. That is very empowering. So the last bit of this presentation is around how the Latinx Feminisms training goes beyond an anthroposophic workshop, so how we use it as a training and it goes beyond an anthroposophic workshop. So as I sort of discussed in terms of what feminist praxis, as in terms of like how Latinx feminism also involves taking action. So we hope that with this feminist, the course, that people put theory into practice, that they engage in politics of resistance, whether it's in the classroom, community work, engage in process of self-reflection, because the decolonization process and challenging all these very dominant ideologies is something that is so embedded and that we need to continue to engage in this process of self-reflection. And then to let feminist theory inform their community organizing. So I wanted to give a couple of examples in terms of how this is how I've been able to use here. So there's a project called Hasta Aquí No Más, Draw the Line project, which was creating a public service announcement to generate conversations in our communities about sexual violence against women and strategies for prevention. So what was important about this PSA was to not portray the Latin American community as backwards and violent. Instead, using an anti-racist feminist approach, the PSA focused on community values such as respect, education, and responsibility. Now, another example, and this is actually my own, experience, and it was when MUJER had won an award for a leadership training on violence prevention. And so one of the English media, when they were interviewing in terms of asking, more information about the program and so on, the question was coming out across as, it's probably necessary because Latin American culture is known for being for its machismo, and so sort of as trying to describe the Latin American community as inherently violent. So in terms of addressing that question, what we did is to move away from that and to discuss how patriarchal values exist here in Canada as well, and that it's not inherent to Latin American culture. And so the last thing is in terms of building community. So as we've seen with the testimonials through the course, people have, they've developed the critical consciousness, the language to theorize, but also how they build deeper connections among, they've built deeper connections. Some of them have become friends. They stay connected through our Facebook group. Some of them have created a book club to continue to engage in these conversations even after the course. And some of them have become involved as MUJER volunteers, board members, and continue to support the organization. And so I wanted to show some pictures of some of the work. So here is this is the first, the last group, last cohort of students, and that's to the right. You see a picture of them making a banner because we were participating in the Dyke March, and so in order to have to participate there, we wanted to create a banner, and so that's everybody working on the banner. And this is us at the Dyke March together with Toronto Rape Crisis Center. And so that's it for the presentation. I do have one more question, and it's more in terms of how to get feedback from you, and it's how would you use Latinx feminisms in your work? So I'm going to open up the poll for that question. So if you could just provide some feedback around that, that would be great. And then there are 2 minutes for that question as well. So I'm just opening it up for questions at this point. So I believe Simone is going to be asking the questions.
Hi, this is Simone.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. Thank you for that presentation. So yeah, we have some questions here. Firstly, there was a question about whether you know if the course will be offered again in 2016.
So we're hoping to offer into 2016. So we're still trying to decide whether it's going to be the winter or spring, but we are hoping to offer it in 2016.
Winter and spring. Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, we have another really interesting question too also that I'll just read aloud that asks, to what extent does the concept Latinx, which goes around the binary feminine, masculine identifiers, is it a contradiction with the term Herstories, which uses female-oriented pronoun?
Actually, that is an excellent question, and I think it's part of sort of that ongoing learning and how we, the language that we use. So I think Latinx is a very new term, and I think that maybe it's part of us continuing to find new terminology to address, to refer to these stories. So yeah. I don't know if I answered the question, but I think it's one of those things. I think that with the process of decolonizing, it's such a journey that it's an ongoing journey, and it's constantly being self-reflective and aware of these contradictions, and being able to actually address them and find maybe new terminologies for addressing them.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for that answer. And if folks who are listening have any follow-up questions or additional questions that came up, please feel free to present them in the Q&A box, and we will moderate them. So on that, we have another follow-up question for you, Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the answer. And what was the first reading that Carolina highlighted from the course readings? There was, I think in your presentation, you highlighted one about Latinx Toronto identities.
So I think the first one may have been, the first quote that I shared was Inés Talamantes, a mindful invitation, or una invitación consciente. That was the first quote. In terms of the Toronto Latinx, the queer Latinx identity, I think that may have been the, sorry, I'm just looking for the reading right now. And it was the one by Carlin Pendleton Jimenez.
Great. Thank you. We were a response here saying thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, we'll just see if there's any questions that come up in the Q&A. And Carolina, another thing for us to elaborate on are the poll questions, and maybe to share what some people's participants' responses were to the questions. We have one response here to the question of what does Latinx feminism mean for you. We have a response from someone in our chat that was private that says race, womanhood, no borders, diverse queer identities. Did you see any other patterns or differences in the responses from the polls?
I actually was trying to, I couldn't see the poll answers. I'm not sure how, I thought I did.
Oh, okay.
But I still cannot see them. I'm sorry, it was my fault. I thought I did.
Okay. Okay, that's okay. We'll see if we can follow up with that and share with everyone. We do have some more questions on that case. First question, I'll go a little bit faster so we can answer them all. First question is, what are the prerequisites to participate in the course?
So what we have done in the past is that we ask participants to submit like just kind of a paragraph or a letter just explaining the reasons why they would like to take the course, maybe share some of the, if they've done any community activism in with the Latin American community, if they could share that. So the prerequisites are really just to share, like to just explain, give us a bit of a reason as to why they would be interested in the course. We do have a bit of, because of resources and because we want to keep also the course small so that there's opportunity for everybody to interact, we usually limit it to up to like 19 people per course. So I know for the last course we had a large number of people applying for the course, and so we had to limit it to 19 and then put some other people on the wait list.
Okay. Okay. Hope that answers that question. I have another question here. Will youth be engaged in the next installment of the course, youth and young women and gender nonconforming people? And if so, how?
Yes, I think that they have been involved already in the development of the course curriculum. As I was mentioning, people have been involved in terms of developing curriculum, presenting, and so we have had youth participating in this, and we hope to continue to do that, and even in the next course. What we usually have done is we create a committee, excuse me, that sort of organizes the course and works on the curriculum. So yes, so those would be the ways in which they can do.
Okay, thank you. And here's the next question. What do you think about the name Abya Yala for Latin America? Is it ever deployed in feminism studies or activism in Canada?
We haven't, I think, or we may actually have used it in the last course. It is definitely a term that I think we are open to using because it does refer to sort of this indigenous part of our history. So yeah. So. Great.
And we have a couple other questions coming up about the course. I'll just bring two questions together. Do you ever consider presenting the course in other provinces? And also, there's a question here about whether you could expand on how this course or taking the course is useful for the training of community members and those that want to participate within organizations like MUJER. and I guess I can add a third question in here also, so you can address everyone's emerging questions. How MUJER reaches out to other spaces that also critique MUJER for not being in more queer spaces. So I guess how can this course be expanded or potentially be expanded in other provinces with queer spaces and in community work or other organizations?
Okay. So in terms of other provinces, I guess that would be something we haven't considered yet. And again, it's probably around the resources aspect of it, because a lot of the courses that we've had so far have been volunteer run. So resources would be an issue in terms of that. But I think we would definitely be open to it if we had the resources to do so. Now, in terms of the other questions around expanding it and engaging with sort of the criticism, I think we've done actually quite well in terms of engaging with that, in terms of how we've addressed this curriculum, the partnerships that we've been able to develop in terms of working with the Toronto Rape Crisis Center and other organizations that have done a lot of work with the queer Latinx communities. As well as the last AGM that we organized, we tried to bring a diversity of voices to come and speak about this, particularly to this Hispanic Heritage Month, and how this is not inclusive of all these different voices or diverse voices, Afro-Latina and queer Latinx voices. And so I think we have been able to engage with these criticisms. We've taken it as lessons learned, I guess, and then trying to now be more aware of it and engaging with other groups and community organizations. So I think that is
great. Thank you for answering that question. We do have a couple more follow-up questions that we'll just continue asking you, Carolina. So here we have a question. It says, I'm reading a book, Latining America, Black Brown Passages, and the Coloring of Latino / Latina Studies, where it critiques the context of Latinidad since it ignores the Black, dark brown body and only represents the brown body. Will these Latinites be brought forth?
Again, because the curriculum is constantly evolving, so I think I definitely would be interested to know more about this, the book and maybe the authors, to be able to use that. But we're constantly also trying to identify some of the gaps within our curriculum, and so this is what's been happening over the years. And so, definitely, if there is anything out there in terms of how Latinidad is excluding or ignoring Black and dark brown bodies, we definitely want to address that. And sorry, there was another question. Was there another question?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. How about the term Tinwand Tisuyu that describes what South America was called during the Inca Empire and contesting the concept of the nation state? I'm just thinking this is in relation to the course content.
Yes. Yes. So we haven't actually, I guess, discussed those terms, but we have definitely, I guess, discussed challenging nationalism and all these, because I mean, even within this nationalist ideologies, it's usually there is also certain gender roles that are ascribed to women, but we definitely do engage in ways of challenging nationalist ideologies.
Okay, thank you. And we have one more question here, and then we will wrap it up. And just to say that there are many questions being, many responses to your answers. People are thanking you for your answers. Yeah. So one final question before we finish the webinar is, have you presented the course in any other Latin American countries? Are you in contact with any Latin American women's organizations?
Sorry, in other countries?
Yes, in other, yes. Are you in, have you presented the course in any other Latin American countries? And are you in contact with any Latin American women's organizations?
No, we have not. This is actually the first time that we've presented or had this presentation in terms of the course. And no, we haven't done it in other countries in terms of whether we've worked. I'm not too familiar with all the partnerships that MUJER has had in the past. So there may have been some partnerships or some work that has been done in collaboration with people in either the United States or Latin America, but I'm not too familiar with that. In terms of the actual course, no, we haven't really, we haven't presented it outside. But again, I think we are definitely open. We have had somebody who, one of the facilitators in the course, in this last course, Fernanda, I forget her last name right now. Her last name escaping my mind, but she is actually doing quite a bit of work with Indigenous women in I believe it's Ecuador or Bolivia. So she actually was here during the time that we had asked her if she could present, and so she presented. So I guess that is sort of a way in which we are connected to Latin America and sort of the work that is being done there.
Great. Thank you. All right. Well, that's all the time we have for our presentation today. For those who would, well, firstly, thank you for your answers, and thank you for your presentation again, Carolina. And for those of you who would like to share this webinar with others, a link to the full presentation and question period will be available online in the next few days. And Girls Action will be sending you a link on where to find it. We would also like to ask for your feedback on today's presentation. So once you leave this webinar, a pop-up window will appear with a very short survey. We would appreciate you taking the time to fill it out. This is a way to help us continue to improve the webinar experience for participants. And excuse me. To find out more on this topic, Girls Action, there's some publications here on the screen. You can check out our publications on our online resource center on our website. And you can also visit our website. The links are on the screen, girlsactionfoundation.ca. Participate in more webinars or watch the previous webinars. They're really interesting. You can like our Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter. And also, if you have more questions about the webinars, feel free to contact Miriam Zaidi at her email. And basically, you can find out more about the upcoming webinars on our website. So again, thank you all for attending, for participating, contributing questions. They were very interesting. And Carolina, thank you for being with us today. And everyone who participated, thank you in advance for filling out the survey. And have a good day.